Hello everyone. I'm going to give a little overview of the Montessori philosophy and a view of one of the Montessori classrooms here at the campus school of Carlow University. First, my name is Kimmy Hartzell. I am one of the Montessori teachers downstairs in the Montessori program here. My background is actually in psychology and child and family counseling, and I got my bachelor's in psychology and my master's in child and family counseling here at Carlow University. I came to the campus lab school by accident, actually. I had needed a part-time job while I was going through grad school, and I met the extended day teacher, and that's how I started working here. And I worked extended day for around, I'm going to say, 6 or 7 years. And I also worked upstairs when the preschool was a traditional preschool before going to Reggio. I just finished my Montessori teaching certificate about 3 months ago in September. It was around a 1.5 to 2 year program, and I am now Montessori certified to teach Montessori 3 to 6-year-olds, which is our program. And I'm just going to give you a little overview first of the Montessori philosophy, and then I will take you around the classroom. I think with Montessori, it is very much a philosophy that you have to see first and see the materials before you can really delve deep in it. It's something that you really have to come and see and experience. It very much is an experience. It's a little different from your traditional preschool or traditional school in that it was founded first by Dr. Maria Montessori, who was one of the first women doctors in Italy. She is actually a doctor. She went to school to be a doctor, a medical doctor, and then she became a therapist, a psychiatrist to children who had what we would now know as autism or like pervasive developmental disorder. And that's where she began her studies into children and into the mind of children and into the education of children. You will see the sensorial area in this video, and she first decided to create materials for children who she was working with in the institution that she was working in at that time. She was a psychiatrist to young children. It was the early 1900s, and so the children were institutionalized, and she was asked to come teach them, and they were thought of not being teachable children because of the fact that they had what we would now be known as intellectual disabilities or autism or pervasive developmental disorder. And she started creating materials for these children to be able to use. One of them was the pink tower, the other one was the red rods, cylinder blocks, all those things. And she realized that when the children were given those opportunities to be able to independently learn, that they flourished, that these children flourished. And she was then asked by a priest around 1907 if she could come to a district in Rome where she was from and teach children whose parents who were from poverty-stricken areas in Rome called San Lorenzo, and ask them to come and teach these children who also, because their parents were from a very poverty-stricken background, they worked all the time. They worked in the labor mills, that they were just kind of running wild within this community. And the priest, Maria Montessori, was herself very Catholic, and they asked her to come and try to teach these children after hearing about her within the institution. And so she decided to go teach them, and that's where she formed her first school, which she called the Children's House, or Casa La Bambini, and she created the school for them, and she created it out of materials that they would see in everyday life, because they did not have the money like maybe other children to go to schools where they were given the materials. They kind of had to use what was around them. And since their parents were at work from like sun up to sundown and the children were just kind of running around the neighborhood, she wanted it to be more practical experiences that they would be able to do within their home. So that's where she came up with Practical Life and giving them practical life skills in order to go about. But then she realized as she kept teaching them, just like she did with the children who had the intellectual disabilities in the institution, that the more that she gave them, the more that they craved, that they were able to learn more about themselves and themselves as within a community, as well as lead their own learning. And that's where she came up with the main point of Montessori, which is following the child. Following the child is the very foundation of Montessori education and of the Montessori method, is following the child's own interests. And if you follow those interests and challenge the child and give them what we call works to do that will help them to find meaning within their own learning, then they will be able to guide their learning. And that's what a lot of Montessori teachers are not referred to as teachers, they're referred to as guides, because it's up to us to not really to push them in way of learning, but to guide them in their learning and to what their natural interests and instincts are within their learning. So that's where the main philosophy comes from. Another principle is that of independence, that if children are given the independence to work without intrusion of the teacher, without, interrupting the child's work, and the children are just free to work by themselves, and we give the lesson originally, and then the child is able to explore with that material in the way that fits them. So it may not be the same way. I have, pouring works, and maybe the children will, children pretend play, and that's perfectly okay. But the children may get something out of that, through their own experience with it, and then they begin to build upon that experiences. And then once we observe that they're building upon that experience, that we are able to guide them into the next step within their learning. Our classroom is a 3-year cycle classroom. That means their children come to us as 2.5, 3-year-olds. More close to 3. We really don't have many 2.5-year-olds, but that's usually when a child can't enter a 3 to 6-year-old classroom. Is around 2.5. They come to us as 3-year-olds, and they leave us usually, we hope, because the 3-year cycle is very important to the Montessori philosophy, as kindergartners. They leave us to go into a 1st grade classroom. And we really promote that, because children within the Montessori classroom, they come in as 3-year-olds, and we kind of look at it as the youngest, the middle, and the oldest child. But not only that, but they're able to grow within their leadership skills. So they come to us as a 3-year-old, they're kind of going around the classroom. Some of them may wander, and that's okay too. And some of them may wander and look around at the works. And we really promote the practical life works that will help them with that independence, with that concentration, with the coordination, and the order to do the rest of their works. That's something we call CCOI, which is very important to our practical life area, as well as the rest of the area within our classroom. So that's what we promote with them as 3-year-olds. Practical life works, sensorial works, which I talked about earlier with the children, that they were created for the children within the institutions. They too are great works for any child. Children very much crave order at this age and sorting, and as a 3-year-old, and that's something that we really promote within a 3-year-old. They could go other places, like we don't really limit where they go throughout the classroom. There are works that they have to go through first in order to get to the next challenging work or the next step work. We very much have a very concrete to abstract order and sequence to our classroom. But that's usually where the 3-year-olds end up. They end up there. They do some, object-to-object matching, which is part of our language. They go to science, geography, which all children love, art, and they learn to clean up after themselves, practical life skills, putting their shoes on, putting their coats on, um, pouring and scooping, all that fun stuff that they're able to do. Building with the pink tower, and I'll show you all these materials in just a minute. And then we have our 4-year-olds who are very much kind of like the middle children. They kind of, they start to crave that social interaction. A 3-year-old is kind of still on parallel play. They're kind of moving into that, more cooperative play, more, I'm gonna play beside you, type work, where they kind of are still in parallel play, still in parallel work, where they are together with another person, but they're not quite combining those works together. They're still very much within their own works and what they would like to do. But a 4-year-old starts moving into that, but they're still kind of like that middle child. They're kind of there. They very much want to help the teacher with a lot of things. That's something that I see a lot with my 4-year-olds. They want to constantly help me rather than, and also they want to, rather than help, maybe the other children, they want to very much help me and help me around the classroom, and I give them little tasks to do, and they're still in that, practical life area, but it's more multi-step, more, we have dishwashing, we have table washing, we have polishing of different objects, plant watering. They're very much in there, as well as moving through the sensorial area. And then they start going into language and math, which is to build upon those skills of reading and, getting ready to write, and then moving into those beginning sounds and blending of words together, so that when they are able to, they can start writing and reading. And then we have our kindergartners, and by the time a Montessori child gets to kindergarten, they are very much leaders within our classroom. That's kind of our hope for them. They have gone through the whole 3-year cycle, which is why the 3-year cycle is important. They've gone through the whole 3-year cycle. They are now leaders. They're moving into those bigger works, those big math works. We call it the mathematical mind, where they have moved through the sensorial area, which very much built upon that mathematical mind, and they are now in math, and they're doing big math works. They work with big complex numbers, in the thousands. We do a lot of place value with them, which a lot of people are usually very surprised that a child of 4.5, 5 can, add two big numbers together. But our materials are very concrete and hands-on. And Maria Montessori has said that her top quote, I think that a lot of Montessorians know, is that the hand is the instrument of intelligence, and it is because children very much learn through touching. And by the time they are 5 years old, 5, 6 years old in our kindergarten class, then they have very much worked with those concrete materials, and now they're moving more into abstraction, more into abstract concepts, where they are learning how to skip count and add and subtract, and some of them even get to multiplication and division, which is quite amazing. And reading isn't always the easiest thing for a young child, but they do. We hope that within that 3-year cycle that we have built up enough and challenge them enough to that where they are able to get to the point where they're so happy to be able to read and move into that place where they are able to read. So that's basically the foundation of our classroom. We call our activities within our classroom works. And it's not in the sense, I think people, when we say that, people tend to think, oh my goodness, you're putting them to work, but we're not. It's very much that, just like you within yourself, you are all in the teaching class, and you may want to be teachers, and that's something that brings you happiness. That's what we hope that our works within our classroom evoke for our children. We observe them, every single one of them, and we write it down, and we record their work. And we observe them for their likes and their interests and even their dislikes, things that maybe were not that popular, and maybe we will move past. But we observe them for their likes and their dislikes, and we try to mold our works, the works that we put out, towards the children. So there may be times where we have, 2 or 3 themes going on, because we observed, last year I observed that my boys really loved monster trucks. And so I put works that were monster truck centered out, counting cards with monster trucks on them, um, language works that, with monster trucks on them, using monster trucks in, science and for, velocity, things like that, things that will evoke, a lot that will evoke their interest that they want to go to. So it's not much about us as it is about them and what they like and their likes and their dislikes and while we are part of that environment to make those works, and it is up to us to say, this is what, Lucas likes, and so I'm going to put this monster truck work together because I've seen that he's really not going to math, and I want him to work on his qualities of symbol work. So I would like to, so let me put these out because I think that he's going, and it truly does work because it did work with the monster trucks. So that's up to us. And we have what we call the pyramid in Montessori, and it is about, the triangle in Montessori, and it is about the child up top, and then down in the other corner is the adult, the teacher, the guide, and then it is the environment. And that is the main focus of our classroom, and that's how we pull our classroom together, is through, focusing on the child. As the adult, we prepare the environment, and then we hope that that environment that we observed and prepared for the child, that invokes some type of learning and some type of love within that child, that they want to go pick works off the shelf that are very much their interest. Our classroom has, it has different areas in it, and the areas are broken up by what we call our curriculum area. The Montessori philosophy is very much a philosophy. It's a whole child philosophy. So we focus on many different areas. It was actually probably the first ever whole child. A lot of education that you see, early childhood education that you see now, is very much molded around Maria Montessori's concepts, even though it doesn't say Maria Montessori, Jean Piaget. That's what it is molded around, is very much the Montessori, Dr. Montessori's thoughts, Piaget's thoughts. They're actually really good friends. So the two of them kind of build off of one another. So it is a whole child approach, and we have different areas within our classroom. The first, like I said, is practical life. The second is sensorial. We have a language area, a math area, and then we have what we call our cosmic areas. Our cosmic areas are science, geography, which is very important within our class. We have art. In our classroom, we have a movement shelf. Not everybody has a movement shelf within their classroom in a Montessori classroom, but Stephanie and I do have a movement shelf. I believe Miss Lori may have one too, intermixed with our peace shelf. We have a peace shelf. Peace is very important within the Montessori philosophy. Maria Montessori very much believed in being a peaceful human and being what she called a global citizen. And she wanted each child who left the Montessori philosophy to be a global citizen, to go out into the world and respect and spread kindness to people who are the similar as you, people who are different than you, people who celebrate different religions. She went to India and opened schools there where she learned about Hinduism and Buddhism, and so it's very much a philosophy that focuses on not just celebrating, we're at a Catholic school, but not just celebrating being Catholic, but celebrating being Muslim, being of the Jewish faith, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever that child celebrating that child for who they are, and sending that children out into the world so that they too can be those global citizens. So our first area is practical life. Practical life is very much the foundation, what I would think would be the foundation of the Montessori philosophy. It was the very first, like I said, it was the very first area that Maria Montessori came up with. And because the children in San Lorenzo, Rome, they that's what they needed to learn. That's what she felt that they needed to learn. They then guided their own learning into language and math, and that's when she started creating for language and math. But within the San Lorenzo school, Casa, we call it the Children's House, because it very much is the Children's House. And in our practical life area, you will very much see, and I'm actually going to show you. You will very much see different works that the child will see in their own home, different containers, and here I'm going to show you. Let me see. Different containers that they can use. You know, we have different things. I mean, things that are breakable. I mean, we very much give them things that they can, different materials, different pitchers that they can use, that they can pour with, that they can work with, that are things that they see in their home. And a lot of children may not be able to use those materials within their home. Their parents may be a little iffy about it because they are just little and think that they may break it. But within our classroom, we really, we hope to teach those skills, and our main focus of daily living is to build, or practical life, we call it both, is to build those skills of like I said before, of concentration, coordination, order, and independence, so they could get. So the first area that we have is always our preliminary. There are different areas of the practical life area, and the first one is preliminary, and those are just scooping works. They're scooping works. They are spooning works. They are pouring works, and then they progressively get a little bit more difficult as they go on. So I'm actually going to bring one over just to show you. And so this right here, I'm just kind of filming myself here, so this right here is one of the works. This is a spooning work, and it has a spoon here, and then like I said, they get more challenging, so it's January. When we first start out, you wouldn't have this. The spooning would very much be two bowls, and it would be more of a scooping, and they would be the same bowls. You would want very similar bowls with a big scoop spoon, and they would scoop back and forth. But this is the first one, and we have a very then they just open it up, which they love. They love doing this, and then they would spoon with this little spoon into these three little bowls, these three little teacups, I guess we would call them. So that would be their main. That's what we refer to as a preliminary skill, preliminary work, and that's, like I said, that's scooping, that's spooning, that is tweezing and tonging and pouring. All those fun work, and children love it, especially the pouring with the water. They love to do that. Right now on my shelf I have, and I'm gonna do a tour of the classroom too, but right now on my shelf that I have one out that is a pouring work that has blue water in it, and it has two different vessels, and they're different sizes, and they have to pour. So then it starts teaching what we think of as the hidden curriculum in Montessori. It starts teaching those skills that maybe they're not sure that they don't know that they're learning about it. They don't know that they're learning like math skills of conversion and how much you could pour in there, but technically they are. So, and it puts that into memory of what we call the muscle memory, that they then could go back to that and say, hey, I kind of did that as a young child, if that makes sense. Then we also have care of self as part of practical life, putting on your coat, putting on your shoes. We have different dressing frames. I'm going to go grab one. we have what we call dressing frames. They could practice this one, I believe, is the snap frame right here. Yep. This is a snap frame here, and we would just give them lesson. When I give a lesson on this, I keep it down on the table, and then I do it top to bottom, left to right, open it, and then close it back up, and I do it very silently. Most practical life work are silent works. They are works that we don't give much language to because we want the child to see what our hands are doing rather than what our mouth is doing. Children will tend to focus more on what you're saying than what you're doing when you are given a lesson. So our practical life work is not like that as we get further into the room, but our practical life works are very much done in a very quiet way. So we have our dressing frames. I have shoes shining out right now, and we have baby washing. So it's very much that's pretty much care of self. Care of others is another part of practical life, and that is, like I said, it could be baby washing, helping a friend put on their shoes, and plant watering, taking care of the community. So care of others doesn't just mean of a person, it also means of what is within our classroom. We also have food prep, which is part of our practical life area, and that has kind of been on the back burner since we had the pandemic, but it actually is a very important part of our Montessori philosophy. Learning how to, peel oranges and bananas and cut bananas and peel eggs. Those are all things that we do. Stephanie and I do it as snack right now. I believe Lori does one. She has hers on her shelf every once in a while. She hasn't brought it back fully, but ours is usually during snack time. We don't have it on the shelf like it was before the pandemic. It's more of like a snack time, like they're making themselves snacks, which works too. And then we have, which is the foundation of our whole classroom, whereas practical life is the foundation of the classroom. What we truly start out with first is called grace and courtesy lessons. And grace and courtesy lessons you can kind of think of as our social emotional learning of our classroom. It pulls together all the care of self, all the care of others, all the learning how to use, carry a tray because the tray has very precious things on them. And we tell them that, this tray has very precious things on them. We have to make sure that we are carrying it nicely. And the things fall all the time. They do. I mean, they're young children, but when they do fall, we don't make a huge deal. We just, is everybody okay over there? Sometimes, I won't even acknowledge that it fell because I want the child to know that that's a normal part of being in our classroom. We have things in our classroom that are breakable, and then we just go and we clean them up. So, and then I will go over and help them clean up. When it first falls, I won't say, but if it's glass, obviously, I go over there and I help them clean it up. But when it first falls, we don't make a deal out of it at all. Just so that the child knows that's that's okay. And as long as we clean it up, then it's fine. We can always replace that item. But a grace and courtesy lesson could be anything from pushing in a chair to make sure friends aren't falling over them, to washing the tables, to cleaning our floors, to making sure that you are being a kind friend. We have something called a peace rose, and that's how they can deal with their arguments. They could go over to the peace rose and they talk through it. So learning how to walk within the classroom, learning how to put your things away, but also learning how to be a peaceful person, learning how to be within our classroom, to where the classroom is able to run. Because like we said, a main goal of our children is independence, is that they can pick works off the shelf for themselves and work with that work independently, without us having to worry about them sitting there working with it independently. So that grace and courtesy lessons very much come in and are a very important proponent of our classroom. So those are the areas of practical life. I will give a tour after I'm done with this. But then we go to sensorial. Sensorial is, like I said, it was first created. It was really the first part of um, Maria Montessori's journey into education is the sensorial area. There's different materials there that the child is able to classify. Children at this age love to sort, they love to classify, they love to see similarities and differences. So there's materials over there, and that's really what sensorial is all about. It's also about a study into art. There's different curves to things. There are what we call the geometric solids that have different curves, different structures to them that are what you formally find in art. So it's all about giving them that mind to be creative, and also to learn how to classify and sort and kind of get to that point where they're able to do that in what we call building the mathematical mind. So that's their first start there. Like I said, these two areas are very much 3-4-year-old areas, but they're not to the certain sense. There are many works in there that a kindergartner can do, but that's where you see a lot of our 3 and early 4-year-olds is in these two areas. I always try to push to guide my 5-year-olds over to practical life and sensorial, for the main reason that sometimes they're just great areas to go. If you see a child who's very jittery, who may be, maybe struggling a little bit, maybe get a little frustrated with work that's more seen as kindergartner work, practical life is a great place for them to go, because like I said, they're very much focusing on concentrating and coordinating their work and working independently, and then sensorial is a great work if you see a child who's maybe struggling a little bit with executive functioning, because it's very much about order and coordination, and grading and classifying and sorting. And so that's a great area for them to go to. So that's our sensorial area. Our math area is our math area has many concrete materials in it. We very much start with quantities, and we work our way up from there, counting. We don't rote count a lot within our classrooms. The materials are very hands-on, and I'll show you that in the tour, where they are able to touch the materials and work with the materials. It's color coordinated. Very much like many things in our classroom, there are materials that you see multiple times, but the challenge for what you're working with is deeper. So it goes from concrete to abstract. It goes from what is very simple, counting, naming the symbol of the number, counting the number, to more abstract concept, more challenging concepts. And that's really how most of our room is sequenced. We very much have a sequence to things. But the math area, it's very apparent. If you would come into our classroom and see the math area, and I would tell you that, you'd be able to see it. And I tell you about each work, you'd be able to see how that progression from the simplest to where the 3-year-olds are starting, to where the kindergarten ends to go into first grade, and they just work with that throughout the whole 3-year cycle. Very hands-on, very concrete. Even our more abstract concepts are still color-coded to back when they were working with 3-year-old materials, so they kind of know where that material is coming from. It's just a little bit more challenging with each step, and they have the whole 3 years to get through that, which is a really great thing. And then we have our language area. Maria Montessori only came up with 3 language materials. The first was the metal insets, the movable alphabet, and the sandpaper letters. The materials for language that Maria Montessori came up with were very much materials that would promote muscle memory. Muscle memory is when you use your hands for things, for works or for an activity, and then it stores it in your brain to come back to later. Maria Montessori came up with the term absorbent mind for young children, and at this age, the absorbent mind is fascinating. I mean, they can absorb anything at this age. So with our sandpaper letters, the children will trace it with 2 fingers. They will trace the letter. They will say the sound of the letter. We always teach sounds first, rather than the name of the letter, and then they will that will be stored because they have used their hands to fill the sandpaper and the groove of the letter, how the curve of the letter, the shape of the letter, and then they say the sound. And that, they don't know it, but we know that gets kind of stored in their memory to come back to later when they're doing beginning sounds, when they're starting to use, the movable alphabet, which is all about, inventive writing. We teach writing first within our classroom, because it's much easier to know your own thoughts than it is to start reading and the thoughts of others. So we promote writing before reading. Usually by the time children do leave our classroom, they are reading. Even the child who may have struggled with reading is reading just a little bit, books. So we very much promote that. And then our whole classroom is very much made up of different language works. We have language in our math, we have language in sensorial, we have language over in our cosmic units, geography, science. Even right now, my art shelf is all about doing artworks related to different types of literacy books that the children have really like. I have one about a woolly hat. I have another one about the Northern Lights and an orca wow who goes in search of the Northern Lights. Miss Stephanie put out a work about The Snowy Day by Jack Ezra. So we have language all throughout our class. Another language work is the metal insets, and I will show you them when on the tour. And the metal insets are very much a work for pencil grip and how to use a pencil, and they just do the different shapes. We have 10 different shapes. 10 is a very big number in our class. Everything kind of relates back to 10 within our class. So we have 10 different shapes. They trace the frame, and then they in the first step, and then the second step is tracing the frame and the inset, and I'll show you those too. So that is basically our language area. We then have our cosmic area, geography. Geography is very big because, like I said, Maria Montessori was very much a global citizen. She wanted the children to know about not only where they came from, but also where other people come from too. So we have continent maps that have each different continent. That we start out the year talking about, the solar system and the planets and all that great stuff that children love to learn about and where they are within the universe. And we talk about that we're from Pittsburgh and that we're from the state of Pennsylvania, and our country is the United States, and our continent is North America, and then we are part of the whole world. And so we start out with the solar system, and then we move into North America where we talk about where we come from. Then we move out. Right now we are talking about Europe within our geography, and so we have different activities, artworks, cards, books out about puzzles about different parts of Europe, and we try to include everything, different cultures, animals, different plants, so all of that stuff that they can really get a general overview of the continent. And then we have our science. Right now we're learning about mammals, and we start out in science with, very, like I said, we start out with very concrete things, and then we move on from the concrete into more abstract thinking. Right now we're learning about mammals and parts of mammals and what makes a mammal, that mammals have hair, they give birth to live young. And then we are talking about dogs right now, parts of the dog, and they have a dog puzzle, and they get to match dogs, which is where the language comes in, different dog figurines with picture cards, and then we learn about the human, because we too are mammals. So that's where we're at in our science. And like I already talked about art, right now in our Peace shelf, the peace curriculum is very important. We have many different, grace and courtesy is very much part of peace. So, and then being a global citizen is part of peace. So right now we're talking about taking deep breaths, and that's basically our peace shelf is all about, taking deep breaths and how to take deep breaths and to help calm yourself down, as well as the peace rose. Then we have our movement shelf. Movement is very important, especially for those little 3-year-olds who are just coming in and they have a lot of energy and moving things. And in our sensorial, that's also what we do. We tend to put the sensorial works across the classroom, the rugs, and they are able to take the work one at a time, back and forth. And you'll see what I mean by that when we go. So that's basically a general overview of our philosophy. Like I said, the philosophy is one that is a philosophy. It's not really a type of teaching. It's more of a philosophy that very much celebrates the whole child, that you want a child who's well-rounded, and that's what we hope to get by the time the children leave our classroom within those 3 years, is a very well-rounded child who loves learning. I mean, that's basically what we want. Who loves learning to their ability, what they are able to do, and their likes and their dislikes, and that they know themselves in that way, and that we have to work. Like I said, we have that triangle with the child, the adult, and then the environment, and they all connect together. And the child is very much most important, and as long as we keep creating an environment that is very inclusive for those children, for all children to learn, that they are able to be in their environment in a way that they are able to be independent and choose their work, because everybody wants to choose their work, right? You wouldn't want to go and do something that you don't love to do, and we never force children to do works that they don't love to do. That's a big component of our classroom too, is not forcing children to do works that maybe they don't like, and that's not to say that we don't, guide them. That's part of our observation, is that we guide them because there's certain things that children do have to learn by a certain time period, but especially to go on to the bigger grades. But we very much, and I know very much within me, that I believe, which is very in line with the Montessori philosophy, that children will tell us what they want to learn, and that we have to meet them where they are at. And the Montessori philosophy very much promotes that. So I'm going to now give a tour of the classroom. That's going to be in a separate video, so I could turn my camera around, because it's not turning around on here. But I hope that you learned a lot from it. I don't know, it's a philosophy I really love, I really believe in, and you're more than welcome to always come and visit our classroom and see how it works. One thing that I do want to point out is that there tends to be where people either think Montessori is very like loosey-goosey, like children are just running around kind of doing whatever they want, or it's kind of rigid because of the materials. There's certain materials that are very exclusive to the Montessori philosophy, but it's really neither. We have what we call, which is part of grace and courtesy, freedom within limits, where we are bound, freedom within boundaries, where we set those boundaries so that the child knows what they could do within the classroom, and that's where the grace and courtesy comes in. But they can't do it in the classroom. We use very positive language, instead of saying no running, we say, you use walking feet, and then we very much practice those types of grace and courtesy lessons in order for that freedom within boundaries. But like I said, it's very much up to the teacher to provide those works within the environment, and then to give those lessons, and then to step back and let the child take it and learn from it the way that they learn, rather than us putting our views of learning onto them, or what we feel that they should know at that time. We also have sensitive periods within that we look for language order, refinement of senses, different sensitive period, mathematics, different sensitive periods that we look for in order to guide them into their learning. So, for example, a child who is writing, who is kind of writing everywhere. I have a child right now who kind of writes on the table, and so I kind of direct him. He's obviously ready to start, certain works that are writing induced. That doesn't necessarily mean that he has to write with a pencil. Some little people, their little fingers, their muscles just aren't ready for that. But he seems like he's ready. So I wrote my observations. It looks like Rex is ready for writing. So to guide him in those types of writing skills. So he's in that sensitive period for language, for writing. So I would write that down. So like I said, it's very much a freedom within limits. It's very much promoting, those concentration, that coordination, that order, that independence that starts in practical life and then sensorial. And then the more they move about within that 3-year cycle, they have the whole 3 years to get through everything. We guide them through it, and they guide themselves. I mean, really, they do. It's a very beautiful philosophy. I feel like it's a very beautiful philosophy to see in person. And so that's the Montessori philosophy. I think that is an overview, and I will give a short tour of the classroom.